No one expected the housekeeper to be a killer until the moment her bullet sliced through the air, stopping a kidnapper's heart as he pressed a gun to an 8-year-old girl's temple. Adela Gomes, a small-framed housekeeper with piercing eyes, stood before the mocking laughter of her arrogant billionaire employer at an exclusive shooting club. Within 48 hours, this same man who had publicly humiliated her would fall to his knees, tears streaming down his face, begging her to save his only daughter from the clutches of kidnappers, men who were exacting revenge for his unpaid debts. Have you ever witnessed a moment when a forgotten skill suddenly became the only thing standing between life and death? The story you're about to hear might just change how you view the invisible people in your everyday life. The Hawthorne Challenge, the Hawthorne Shooting Club, was not a place for people like Adela Gomes. Its mahogany-paneled walls and crystal chandeliers seemed to sneer at her simple white uniform as she trailed behind her employer, Beckett Phillips, and his 8-year-old daughter, Bernice. Adela kept her eyes down as she walked, feeling the stares of the club members who clearly wondered what business a housekeeper had in their sacred space. She wasn't supposed to be there, but Bernice's regular nanny had called in sick, and Beckett had an important meeting with business associates that couldn't be postponed. "Stay with Bernice in the lounge area," Beckett instructed, his tone clipped and dismissive as always. "Don't wander around. This isn't a place for... well, just stay with Bernice." Bernice, unlike her father, beamed at Adela. "Can we watch them shoot, Adela, please?" she pleaded, tugging at the housekeeper's hand. Before Adela could answer, Beckett had already walked away to join a group of similarly well-dressed men at the far end of the club. They made their way to a glass-walled section overlooking the shooting range, where club members were taking turns demonstrating their marksmanship. The sound of gunfire, even muffled through the thick glass, awakened something in Adela. Memories she had buried deep for 20 years. Her fingers twitched slightly, remembering the weight of a rifle, the pressure of a trigger, the focus required to hit a target hundreds of yards away. Their quiet observation was interrupted when Beckett's voice suddenly rang out from behind them. "What are you doing here? I told you to stay in the lounge." His face was flushed with anger, or perhaps embarrassment, as several of his associates stood behind him. One of them snickered. "You bring your help to Hawthorne now, Beck? What next? The gardener gets to join the golf club." The others laughed, and Adela felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. Beckett's jaw tightened. Then, perhaps to save face, his expression shifted to one of cruel mischief. "You know what might be entertaining, gentlemen? My housekeeper here thinks she belongs at a shooting club. Perhaps we should see what she can do with a gun." The suggestion was met with hoots of approval. "What do you say, Adela? Care to show us what you've got? I'll put $10,000 on the line that says you can't hit a target at 200 yards. Adela wanted nothing more than to take Bernice and leave. But something in Beckett's smug expression ignited a fire that had been dormant for too long. "I'll take that bet, Mr. Phillips," she heard herself say, the voice steadier than she expected. "But if I win, the money goes to the children's hospital downtown." The revelation as Beckett handed her a rifle, explaining the controls as if to a child. Adela took it with practiced ease. She positioned herself at the firing line, while Beckett's friends watched with predatory anticipation. Adela raised the rifle, pressed it firmly against her shoulder, and took a deep breath. Her finger found the trigger as her mind traveled back 20 years, to dusty landscapes and military uniforms, to a time when she had been one of the most respected sharpshooters in her elite unit. The shot echoed through the range, followed by a moment of perfect silence. Through the scope, Adela could see her bullet had struck dead center of the target. She lowered the rifle, her expression unchanged as she turned to face Beckett and his friends. Their smug smiles had vanished, replaced by slack-jawed disbelief. Bernice was the first to break the silence, letting out an excited cheer. "That wasn't luck, Beck. "Your housekeeper knows her way around a firearm," said one of his associates, extending his hand to Adela. Richard Kensington, former Marine Corps. "Where did you learn to shoot like that, Miss Gomes?" Another voice joined the conversation. "She learned from the best. That's how." An older man with weathered features approached the group. His name tag identified him as Ethan Evans, range instructor. There was a knowing look in his eyes as he examined Adela. A flash of recognition between veterans. "You're holding that rifle like it's an extension of your arm, ma'am. Military training, if I had to guess. And not just basic, either." Adela met his gaze without flinching, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. For 20 years, she had buried that part of herself, locked it away after the training accident that had taken her husband's life. She had been an elite sharpshooter, among the top in her unit. But after losing Miguel to a misfired weapon during a routine exercise, she had turned her back on that life completely. The past unveiled as Ethan's words hung in the air. Adela's mind drifted back to another time and place. The scorching heat of the Afghan desert, the weight of her spotter's scope against her shoulder, the whispered calculations between her and Miguel as they worked in perfect unison. She the shooter, he the spotter. They had met in sniper school, drawn together by a shared intensity and precision that few others understood. Both children of immigrants who had enlisted to serve their adopted country, they had found in each other a kindred spirit, a matching piece. Their commanding officers had initially been reluctant to pair a husband and wife on missions, but their results spoke for themselves. 23 consecutive successful operations, with Adela setting a division record for longest confirmed shot. Then came the training exercise that changed everything. A freak mechanical failure in Miguel's rifle, a hairline fracture in the firing mechanism that no inspection had caught. The explosion had been catastrophic, killing him instantly and leaving Adela with shrapnel scars across her left arm. The physical wounds had healed, but the psychological ones ran deeper. She couldn't touch a firearm without seeing Miguel's face in that final moment, couldn't hear a gunshot without flinching. She had accepted an honorable discharge, walked away from commendations and promotions, seeking anonymity in the most ordinary work she could find. Being invisible had felt like safety, like penance. Until now, when Beckett's cruel challenge had awakened the soldier she had tried so hard to forget. "Pay up, Mr. Phillips," Adela said quietly, her voice pulling her back to the present. "The Children's Hospital will appreciate your donation." Beckett's jaw clenched. "I want double or nothing," he announced. 400 yards this time. No one gets lucky twice. 3 shots rang out in quick succession, each finding its mark with devastating precision. Beckett had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is ridiculous. You've made me look like a fool in front of my associates. You're fired. Effective immediately." Bernice gasped, tears welling in her blue eyes as she grabbed Adela's hand. "No, Daddy, you can't. Who will take care of me?" The child's distress seemed to penetrate Beckett's anger. "Fine. You have until the end of the week." Without waiting for a response, he turned on his heel, gesturing for his friends to follow him back to the club's private lounge. The warning signs as they prepared to leave. Adela noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. In the parking lot, a black van with tinted windows was parked at an odd angle, and 2 men inside seemed to be photographing the club entrance. More disturbingly, she caught one of them zooming in specifically on Bernice. Acting on instinct, Adela positioned herself between the van and the girl, shielding her from view. As they drove back to the Phillips estate, Adela noticed the same black van following at a discreet distance. Something told her that Beckett Phillips was involved in troubles far deeper than wounded pride. Troubles that might soon put his daughter in danger. Life at the Phillips mansion grew increasingly tense following the incident at the Hawthorne shooting club. Beckett assigned Adela the most demeaning tasks, all while pointedly ignoring her presence whenever they happened to be in the same room. Bernice, on the other hand, had become Adela's shadow, following her from room to room with wide, curious eyes. Were you really a soldier, Adela? Did you fight in wars? The questions poured out of her with childish enthusiasm. One afternoon, while Beckett was "Not that you'll ever need these," she assured the girl, "but every woman should know how to protect herself." What Adela didn't say was that her concern about the men in the black van had only grown in recent days. That evening, Beckett returned home unexpectedly early, catching them in the middle of a practice session. His reaction was explosive. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he bellowed. "Are you turning my daughter into some kind of street fighter?" Adela stepped forward, placing herself between father and daughter. "I'm teaching her basic self-defense, Mr. Phillips. It's an important skill for any young girl to learn." Beckett's face darkened. "I don't pay you to make these decisions. I don't pay you to think at all. Pack your things tonight. I want you gone by morning." Bernice burst into tears, clinging to Adela with surprising strength. "No, Daddy, please. The other nannies don't care about me. They're just here for your money." Her words seemed to hit Beckett like physical blows. "What are you scared of, Princess?" he asked, kneeling down to her level. "The men who come to the house late at night. The ones who make you nervous. I hear you arguing with them when you think I'm asleep. They say mean things about what they'll do if you don't pay them." Beckett looked stricken, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. The threat revealed after putting Bernice to bed, Adela overheard Beckett's phone conversation through the partially open door of his study. "I don't have that kind of money right now." Beckett's voice was desperate. "The market crash wiped me out, and the banks won't extend any more credit. I need more time." The response from the other end was loud enough for Adela to hear. A cold, threatening voice. "Saturday, Westlake gas station. 2 p.m. Bring the money, or we'll take something of equal value instead." The implication was clear, and it confirmed Adela's worst fears. Bernice was in danger, targeted because of her father's financial problems and unpaid debts. That night, after the house had fallen silent, Adela reached into the back of her closet and pulled out a small lockbox she hadn't opened in 20 years. Inside, nestled in padded fabric, lay her military ID tags and a faded photograph of a young couple in uniform. "I'm sorry, Miguel," she whispered to the smiling face of her late husband. "I know I promised to leave this life behind, but there's a little girl who needs me now." Preparation the next morning, Adela drove to the Hawthorne Shooting Club during the quiet early hours. Ethan Evans was already there, as promised. "Figured you'd be back," he said with a knowing nod. For the next 3 hours, Adela reacquainted herself with the art and science that had once defined her existence. By the end of the session, she was consistently hitting targets at ranges that would impress even current military snipers. "Do you mind telling me what this is really about?" Ethan asked. Adela told him about the mysterious black van, the threatening phone calls, and Beckett's mounting financial troubles. "I think they're planning to kidnap his daughter if he doesn't pay up on Saturday." Ethan's expression darkened. "You're talking about the Westlake crew. Bad news. They started as loan sharks, but have graduated to full-blown organized crime. Extortion, kidnapping, even murder when it suits them." As they were speaking, Adela's phone rang. It was Bernice, her voice small and frightened. "Adela, where are you? There are strange men here talking to Daddy in his study. They're being really loud, and Daddy sounds scared." Adela's blood ran cold. "Stay in your room, P. Lock the door and don't come out until I get there." But when they arrived at the Phillips estate, the massive iron gates stood open, and Beckett's expensive cars were missing from the driveway. Inside, Bernice's bedroom door was locked as instructed. But when Adela called out to her, there was no response. Heart pounding, she forced the door open, only to find the room empty. On the bed lay a hastily scrawled note in childish handwriting. "Daddy said we have to go away for a while. He looked really scared. The men made him take me. Help us, Adela. The abduction Ethan arrived moments later with a police officer, Detective Rivera, who immediately called for backup. Just as they were discussing next steps, Adela's phone rang again. This time, it was Beckett himself, his voice barely recognizable through his panic. "They've taken Bernice," he sobbed. "They knocked me out and left me at a gas station. When I came to, she was gone. They sent a video." "Oh God, Adela. She's terrified. She keeps calling for you." In the background, Adela could hear the sounds of a car in motion. "They want $5 million by tomorrow night." The cars are leased. My investment portfolio collapsed months ago. I've been keeping up appearances with more and more loans. And now my baby is paying the price for my pride. Detective Rivera took the phone, identifying herself and trying to get more information. They said no police. They'll know. They have someone watching. Just Adela. Beckett's voice cracked. They said bring Adela, or they'll hurt Bernice. They know about her military background. They want her skills for something. Whatever the Westlake crew was planning, it involved more than just a simple ransom demand. They wanted Adela specifically, which meant they had been watching the Phillips family long before the incident at the shooting club. After ending the call, Detective Rivera turned to Adela with a grave expression. "I can't officially sanction what I think you're planning to do, but I also can't stop you." She handed Adela a small tracking device. "Put this somewhere they won't find it. We'll be monitoring, but we won't move in unless absolutely necessary." Ethan, who had been quietly making calls of his own, approached. "I've got intel on where they might be holding her. There's an old training compound in the woods outside the city that the Westlake crew has been using as a base of operations." The rescue plan as night fell. Adela found herself in Ethan's truck, heading toward the compound, armed with the skills she had hoped never to use again. Beckett, having finally composed himself enough to function, insisted on coming along despite their protests. "She's my daughter," he said simply, his voice hollow but resolute. "I got her into this mess with my lies and my debts. I need to help get her out, even if it costs me my life." The old training compound loomed in the darkness like a malevolent presence. Adela, Beckett, and Ethan observed from a ridge overlooking the compound, using night vision binoculars to assess the situation. The main building was lit from within, and armed guards patrolled the perimeter in regular intervals. Most concerning of all was the small wooden cabin set apart from the other buildings, with 2 guards stationed outside its only door. "That's where they're keeping her," Adela whispered. As they continued their surveillance, Adela's phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. A video of Bernice, her face tear-stained but resolute, sitting on a cot in what appeared to be the interior of the cabin they were observing. "Please send Adela," the child whispered into the camera. "They said they won't hurt me if Adela comes alone. They said she has skills they need for a job." The message accompanying the video was terse. "The woman comes alone. Midnight tomorrow. Any sign of police or military, the girl dies." "It's a trap," Ethan stated flatly. "They'll use Bernice to control you, force you to do whatever they're planning, then eliminate all witnesses." Adela nodded, having reached the same conclusion. "I know, but it's also our best chance to get close to Bernice." She began removing items from Ethan's tactical gear bag. A communications earpiece, a compact night vision monocular, and a sniper rifle. "I'm going in. Not now, and not the way they expect, but I'm going in." Beckett watched her with a mixture of awe and desperation. "I've been horrible to you," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I treated you like you were nothing, like you were invisible. And now you're the only one who can save my daughter." Adela met his gaze steadily. "I'm not doing this for you, Mr. Phillips. I'm doing it for Bernice. She's an innocent child who deserves a chance at life. But when this is over, when Bernice is safe, You and I are going to have a long conversation about respect, about seeing people for who they really are instead of what they do for a living. The infiltration, they formulated a plan. Ethan would create a diversion, a series of controlled explosions using materials from his truck. Beckett would drive up to the main entrance at the appointed time to stall them, while Adela would approach from the west, using the forest as cover. As darkness fell once more, they moved into position. Adela, dressed in tactical black and carrying the minimum equipment necessary for the mission, began her silent approach through the western forest. After 20 years of trying to forget who she had been, she was about to remember in the most crucial way possible. The forest embraced Adela, like an old friend, as she moved silently through the underbrush. At precisely 11 p.m., 1 hour before the kidnapper's deadline, Ethan triggered the first explosion on the eastern side of the compound. The blast shattered the night silence, followed quickly by 2 more detonations in sequence. Almost immediately, when the 4th explosion rocked the compound, Adela made her move, sprinting from cover to cover, working her way methodically closer to her target. Meanwhile, Beckett had timed his arrival to coincide with the chaos of the explosions. He drove his SUV directly to the front gate, headlights illuminating the surprised faces of the remaining guards. "I'm here to speak with whoever's in charge," he shouted, stepping out of the vehicle with his hands raised. "I have information about the explosions, and I want to see my daughter." His voice carried the perfect blend of fear and authority, drawing attention exactly as planned. The confrontation, as she neared the cabin, Adela noticed something that made her blood run cold. The 2 guards were positioned as if they were expecting trouble, specifically at this location, despite the distractions elsewhere in the compound. Had their plan been compromised? Pressing herself against the cabin's outer wall, Adela listened intently for voices from within. What she heard confirmed her worst fears. "Your father has arrived, just as expected," a voice was saying. "And I imagine your former nanny is not far behind. They're quite predictable, these people who care about you." Bernice's response was muffled, but there was defiance in her tone despite her obvious fear. "Adela is going to make you sorry. She's not like regular nannies. She's a soldier, and she can shoot better than anyone." A cold laugh followed. "Ha, we're counting on that, little one. Your Adela's skills are precisely why we arranged this whole scenario. We need someone with her particular talents for a job that requires absolute cooperation, which is where you come in." The kidnapping wasn't just about extorting money from Beckett. It was about coercing Adela into using her sniper skills for some unknown purpose. When the next series of explosions tore through the compound, far larger than the previous ones, one of the guards at the cabin door rushed toward the main building, leaving only 1 man on duty. Adela studied the remaining guard through narrowed eyes. His stance revealed professional training. Weight slightly forward on the balls of his feet, hand never straying far from his holstered weapon, gazed methodically scanning the perimeter. Not some common thug, but likely ex-military or special forces. Taking him out silently would require perfect timing and execution. She waited, counting his patrol pattern, noting that he checked his watch every 45 seconds, likely coordinating with the other guards via radio on a timed schedule. Just as he turned to make another perimeter check, Adela emerged from the shadows like a ghost, her movements fluid and precisely calculated. Years of close-quarters combat training flooded back into her muscle memory as she closed the distance in 3 swift steps. Before the guard could register the threat, Adela's hand clamped over his mouth from behind, while her other arm snaked around his throat in a textbook blood choke. Pressure applied precisely to the carotid arteries on either side of his neck, cutting off blood flow to the brain without restricting air and triggering a gasping reaction. The guard's training kicked in immediately as he attempted to counter, his elbow driving backward toward her ribs. Adela had anticipated this, shifting her stance to absorb the blow against her hip while maintaining the choke. His next move, attempting to reach for his sidearm, was similarly countered as she hooked her leg around his, destabilizing his balance and forcing him to focus on remaining upright rather than drawing his weapon. Within 12 seconds, precisely the window before unconsciousness from a properly applied blood choke, the guard's struggling weakened and his body went limp. Adela lowered him silently to the ground, quickly securing his wrists and ankles with zip ties from her tactical belt and relieving him of his radio and weapon. She checked his pulse, strong and steady, confirming he was merely unconscious, not dead. Unlike many in her former unit, Adela had always believed in minimum necessary force. Taking a life, even enemy combatants, carried weight that never fully lifted from the soul. She would kill if necessary to save Bernice, but not if alternatives existed. The rescue using the guard's key card, she approached the cabin door, pressing herself flat against the wall beside it. From inside, she could hear movement, at least one person pacing, the creak of weight shifting on what sounded like a wooden chair, and Bernice's soft, occasional sniffles. Adela drew a slow, centering breath, mentally mapping the cabin's likely layout. Based on its exterior dimensions, the main anyone inside would have their attention naturally drawn to the opening door, creating a critical second or two of advantage. With practiced precision, Adela slid the key card through the reader, waiting for the telltale click of the electronic lock disengaging. In one fluid motion, she pushed the door open with her left hand, while maintaining position against the wall, out of the immediate line of sight of anyone inside. When no immediate reaction came, she pivoted smoothly into the doorway, her borrowed pistol held in a perfect two-handed stance, sweeping the interior with trained eyes that assessed threats in milliseconds. The interior was spartanly furnished, with a single cot where Bernice sat, wide-eyed but unharmed. Beside her stood a tall, lean man with cold eyes and a gun pointed casually at the child's head. Unlike the guard outside, this man had the relaxed confidence of someone used to giving orders rather than taking them. His suit was expensively tailored, his posture almost aristocratic, but his eyes held the flat, evaluating gaze of a predator. He smiled when he saw Adela, as if greeting an expected guest. "Right on time, Sergeant Gomes," he said, using her former military rank with a precision that sent ice through her veins. He knew her, not just her name or her current identity, but details of her military service that should have been classified. Or do you prefer Miss these days? Hard to keep track when someone buries their past so thoroughly. Bernice made a small, desperate sound, reaching toward Adela before the man tightened his grip on her shoulder. "Ah, not so fast. We have business to discuss before this touching reunion can continue." The girl froze, her eyes locked on Adela's face with a trust that was both heartbreaking and fortifying. Despite her terror, Bernice's expression held absolute faith that Adela would save her. A trust the former soldier silently vowed not to betray. Adela kept her expression neutral, though her mind was working frantically to assess the situation. The man knew her military background, which meant he had access to classified information. This was no ordinary criminal. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. The man's smile widened, revealing teeth too perfect to be natural. "What every successful business enterprise wants, to eliminate the competition. There's a federal witness being transported to a secure location tomorrow evening. He's prepared to testify against our organization, to name names all the way to the top. Your job is to make sure he never reaches his destination. One shot, one kill, just like the old days." He gestured with his free hand toward a folder on a small table. "All the details are in there. The route, the security protocols, the exact time and place where you'll have your opportunity." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing a business transaction rather than contract murder. "We've even procured a rifle with specifications matching your old service weapon." I understand sentimentality can improve performance in these matters. And if I refuse? Adela asked, though she already knew the answer. The man pressed the barrel of his gun more firmly against Bernice's temple, making the child whimper in fear. Then I put a bullet in the girl's brain, and then one in her father's, and then, just for good measure, one in yours. His casual discussion of multiple murders chilled Adela to the core. It's quite simple, really. You make one clean shot tomorrow, and everyone walks away. You refuse, and well, he shrugged elegantly, I think the outcome is clear. This wasn't just about eliminating a witness. It was about pulling her into their criminal enterprise, making her complicit in their operations. Once she took that shot, she would be bound to them forever, either as an asset or as a liability to be eliminated. The weight of the choice pressed down on her. Become a murderer again, this time targeting an innocent, or watch Bernice die. There were no good options, no clear path to safety for any of them. Just as the situation seemed most dire, a commotion erupted outside, shouting, the sound of breaking glass, and then a single gunshot. The man's attention wavered for just a fraction of a second, his eyes flicking toward the window. But it was enough. In that heartbeat of distraction, Adela saw her only chance. The decisive moment she launched herself forward with explosive force, covering the distance between them in a blur of movement that seemed to catch the man entirely by surprise. His weapon discharged, but Adela's attack had already knocked his aim upward, sending the bullet harmlessly into the ceiling. Bernice screamed, then displayed remarkable presence of mind as she If there's danger, make yourself small. Find cover and stay there until I tell you it's safe. Now fully committed, Adela grappled with her opponent for control of the firearm, her trained hands targeting the pressure points of his wrist and thumb. Unlike the guard outside, this man had formal combat training, evident in the way he attempted to counter her grip by rotating his arm outward while simultaneously driving his knee toward her midsection. Adela twisted away from the knee strike, using his own momentum to further compromise his balance. Despite years away from active service, Adela's combat training reasserted itself with crystalline clarity. Each move and counter-move flowed in a deadly dance as she methodically isolated his gun hand. She could feel the exact moment when the bones and tendons in his wrist reached their breaking point under her applied pressure, with a sharp crack audible even over their labored breathing. His grip failed, and the weapon clattered to the floor, rather than dive for the fallen gun, a rookie mistake that would leave her vulnerable. Adela maintained her offensive, delivering a devastating knee strike to his solar plexus. The precision of the blow drove the air from his lungs in a whoosh, momentarily paralyzing his diaphragm. As he doubled over, gasping in a reflexive attempt to breathe, Adela seized the back of his head with both hands, controlling his movement as she brought it down to meet her rising knee. The impact was calculated, forceful enough to render him unconscious, but positioned to avoid fatal damage to the fragile bones of the face and skull. This wasn't the uncontrolled violence of street fighting, but the cold efficiency of military close-quarters combat, where each movement was designed to neutralize a threat with maximum effectiveness and minimum wasted energy. He collapsed to the floor, unconscious but still breathing, a thin trickle of blood running from his nose and split lip. Only then did Adela retrieve the fallen weapon, checking the chamber and safety with habitual thoroughness before securing it at her waistband. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 20 seconds, but it felt like hours, adrenaline stretching each moment into painful clarity. Now that the immediate threat was neutralized, she could feel the protest of muscles long unused to such intense exertion, the sting of what would become bruises along her forearms where she had blocked his counters. "Bernice, come on. We have to go." Adela extended her hand toward the cot, her voice gentle but urgent. Slowly, Bernice emerged from her hiding place, her face pale, but her eyes remarkably clear and focused for a child who had just witnessed such violence. "You beat him," she whispered, all replacing fear in her voice as she stared at the unconscious man. Just like in the movies. Despite the urgency of their situation, Adela couldn't help but smile slightly at the comparison. Not exactly like the movies, Pika. In movies, people get knocked out and stay unconscious for hours. In real life, he'll wake up in a few minutes, which means we need to move now. Stay close to me and do exactly as I say. She quickly zip-tied the man's wrists and ankles, using the guard's restraints, then gagged him with a strip torn from her own undershirt to prevent him from raising an alarm when he regained consciousness. After retrieving the folder with the assassination details, evidence they would need later, Adela led Bernice to the cabin door, peering outside cautiously. The compound was in chaos, with fires burning from the explosions and men running in all directions. Their path to the forest was temporarily clear, but they would need to move quickly before someone noticed the missing guard or the unconscious man inside the cabin. "Ready to run?" Adela asked, gripping Bernice's hand firmly. The little girl nodded, her jaw set with determination despite the tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. Together, they slipped out of the cabin and into the night, making for the safety of the trees. But their escape was far from assured, and Beckett was still somewhere in the compound, possibly in grave danger. The final standoff, as they reached the edge of the forest, Adela made a split-second decision that would alter the course of the night and potentially all their lives. Instead of continuing to the rendezvous point as planned, she turned back toward the heart of the compound. They couldn't lead without Beckett, not when he had willingly placed himself in danger to save his daughter. From her vantage point at the edge of the forest, Adela could see the leader of the Westlake crew, a heavy-set man with a shaved head whom Adela recognized as Victor Clove, walked beside him, gesturing angrily as he spoke. "Stay here," Adela whispered to Bernice, guiding the child to a hollow beneath a fallen tree. "No matter what happens, no matter what you hear, don't move from this spot until I come back for you." An abandoned watchtower provided the perfect position. Adela scaled it swiftly, setting up her rifle with practiced efficiency. Through the scope, she could hear Clove lecturing Beckett. "You thought you could play in our world, Phillips. Borrow millions without consequences. Pretend to be something you're not." Beckett stood straighter, a strange calm settling over his features. "My daughter is beyond your reach now. And as for the sniper, well, I wouldn't stand in the open like that if I were you." It was a bluff, but a dangerous one. Clove's face contorted with rage, and he drew his pistol, pressing it directly against Beckett's forehead. "You think this is a game? Perhaps I'll find your daughter myself once you're gone." Children can be so malleable with the right persuasion. Time slowed to a crystalline standstill as Adela settled into position atop the watchtower. Her breathing deepened, becoming measured and deliberate. -4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, the rhythmic pattern she had learned 2 decades ago. A distant part of her mind registered the cool metal of the rifle against her cheek, the slight dampness in the air that would affect the bullet's trajectory, the gentle breeze from the west that would push the shot approximately 2 inches at this distance. But these calculations happened almost subconsciously, muscle memory taking over as her conscious mind entered a state of perfect meditative focus. Through the scope, Clove's face appeared in stark detail. The sheen of sweat on his forehead, the twisted snarl of his lips, the cold determination in his eyes as his finger began to tighten on the trigger pressed against Beckett's temple. Adela had less than a second to act. In that infinite decimal moment, 1,000 thoughts converged. She could take the easier shot, aim for Clove's center mass as she had been trained. But that risked killing a man, becoming once again the soldier she had struggled to leave behind. There was another way, one that required perfect precision, the kind of shot that had once earned her commendations, but also the kind that could go catastrophically wrong if miscalculated by even a millimeter. Miguel's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, an echo from countless training sessions. Trust your instincts, Querida. When the moment comes, don't think. She exhaled slowly, her finger applying just the right pressure to the trigger. Not pulling but squeezing, becoming one with the mechanism. The rifle's report echoed across the compound, a sound both familiar and foreign after so many years, like meeting an old friend whose face you'd almost forgotten. The world snapped back into normal speed. Through the scope, Adela watched as Clove's pistol flew from his hand, shattered by her bullet with surgical precision, the metal fragmenting away from both men, harming neither. The criminal's expression transformed from murderous intent to disbelieving shock in an instant, his eyes widening as he stayed at his bleeding hand, then scanning the darkness frantically for the source of the shot. Beside him, Beckett appeared equally stunned, his body rigid with the expectation of death suddenly denied, his gaze following the trajectory of the bullet back toward the watchtower where Adela had positioned herself. What struck Adela most powerfully, watching through the scope, was the transformation in Beckett's face. Beyond the immediate relief of survival, something deeper shifted in his expression. A dawning recognition, perhaps for the first time, of his own vulnerability and dependence on others. The arrogant mask he had worn so confidently had been stripped away, revealing the frightened man beneath. But there was something else there too, a glimmer of understanding, of seeing Adela not as a servant, but as a person of extraordinary capability and courage. Someone who had chosen to save him despite having every reason not to. The escaped Clove's men were scrambling now, weapons drawn, searching for the shooter. Adela was already moving, abandoning the rifle which could be traced back to Ethan, and descending from the watchtower with controlled haste. She had bought Beckett some time, but the situation remained perilous. She needed to reach him before Clove's men regrouped. Using the continuing chaos from Ethan's explosions as cover, Adela made her way across. She could see Beckett now, taking advantage of the confusion to break away from his captors, running awkwardly with his hands still bound behind his back. Clove, recovering from the initial shock, was bellowing orders, directing his men to secure the perimeter and find the sniper. "Bring me the woman alive," he shouted, his voice thick with pain and rage. "She has skills we can use, but Phillips dies tonight." The declaration sent a fresh surge of urgency through Adela. She needed to reach Beckett before Clove's men did, needed to get him back to the forest where Bernice was waiting. She intercepted him near the edge of the parade ground, pulling him into the shadow of a storage shed just as searchlights began sweeping the area. "Adela," he gasped, relief and disbelief mingling in his voice. "That shot, was that you? Where's Bernice? Is she safe?" Adela quickly cut the zip ties binding his wrists, noting the raw, bleeding skin beneath, evidence of his desperate attempts to free himself. "Bernice is hidden in the forest," she assured him, already plotting their escape route. "She's safe for now, but we need to move quickly." Just as they prepared to make their break for the forest, a voice called out from behind them. "Leaving so soon? The party's just getting started." They turned to find Clove standing mere yards away, a rifle now clutched in his uninjured hand, its barrel aimed squarely at Beckett's chest. "I'm impressed, Sergeant Gomes. That was a remarkable shot, taking out my pistol without killing me. Very precise, very professional." He took a step closer, his smile cold and calculating. "You could have killed me, but you didn't. That's a mistake in our line of work." As Clove began to squeeze the trigger, Adela launched herself sideways, knocking Beckett to the ground while simultaneously drawing the pistol she had taken from the cabin. Time seemed to slow as her military training took over completely. She fired twice in rapid succession, her aim unerring despite the awkward angle and poor lighting. The first bullet struck Clove's shoulder, spinning him halfway around. The second hit the rifle itself, rendering it useless. Clov dropped to one knee, clutching his wounded shoulder, shock and grudging respect dawning on his face. "Go," Adela hissed to Beckett, pushing him toward the tree line. "Get to Bernice. I'll be right behind you." With a last anguished look at Adela, he sprinted for the forest. Adela faced Clov once more, her pistol trained steadily on his center mass. "It's over," she said quietly. "The police are already on their way. Detective Rivera has been tracking us from the beginning. Your operation here is finished." In the forest, Adela found Beckett kneeling beside the fallen tree where she had hidden Bernice, father and daughter, locked in a fierce embrace. When he saw Adela approaching, something shifted in his expression. A fundamental change that went beyond gratitude or relief. For perhaps the first time, he was seeing her as she truly was, not as the help, not as an employee or subordinate, but as a complete human being with depths and complexities he had never bothered to acknowledge before. "You saved us," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. "Both of us." The aftermath of the Westlake crew confrontation should have been straightforward. Detective Rivera and her tactical team secured the compound, arresting dozens of Westlake members, including Victor Clov. The evidence recovered from the site, including the folder detailing plans to assassinate a federal witness, provided enough material for prosecutors to begin dismantling the organization's network. But the real world rarely ties up its loose ends so neatly. 3 weeks after the rescue, as Adela was helping Bernice with her homework in the modest apartment that the Phillips family now called home, a news alert flashed across the television screen. Victor Clov had escaped police custody during a hospital transfer, leaving 2 officers wounded. The manhunt was underway, but authorities feared he had already left the country. The news cast a shadow over their tentative new beginning. Beckett, who had been making genuine efforts to rebuild his life on more honest foundations, immediately wanted to flee. To take Bernice and disappear to some place where Clov could never find them. "He'll come for us," he insisted, pacing the small living room like a caged animal. "For all of us. You know he will." Adela did know. Men like Clov didn't forgive humiliation or defeat, and his escape suggested he still had resources, connections that extended into law enforcement itself. They were dealing with something far more dangerous than a simple criminal organization. Something with tentacles reaching into places. "We'll never stop looking over our shoulders, and he'll never stop hunting." "What then?" Beckett demanded, fear making his voice sharp. "We just wait for him to find us? To take Bernice again? To kill you?" Adela looked at Bernice, who was watching the adults with the too solemn eyes of a child who had seen too much, too soon. "No," she said, her decision crystallizing. "We find him first." The hunt as what followed was a dangerous dance of hunter and hunted, with roles constantly reversing. Using contacts from her military days, Adela tracked Clov's movements through Eastern Europe, always one step behind, but gradually closing the gap. Beckett, drawing on his business acumen and connections that had survived his financial collapse, provided intel and resources. Even Detective Rivera, operating off the books after corruption in her department forced her into early retirement, joined their unlikely alliance. The final confrontation came 6 months later in a remote chalet in the Swiss Alps. Clov had been rebuilding his network, gathering remnants of the Westlake crew and connecting with European criminal enterprises. He had also been planning his revenge. Detailed files on Adela, Beckett, and even Bernice, now safely hidden in a secure location with Ethan, indicated he had never abandoned his vendetta. When Adela finally faced him again, it was across the length of a cavernous great room, fire-like glinting off the weapon in his hand. "I knew you'd come eventually," he said, his voice as cold as the snow swirling outside the windows. The loyal soldier, still fighting other people's battles. "This isn't someone else's battle," Adela replied, her own weapon steady in her hands. "You made it mine when you targeted a child." The ensuing firefight left the chalet in flames, Clove's new organization in disarray, and Adela with a bullet wound in her shoulder that would add another scar to her collection. But when the authorities arrived, alerted by Rivera's careful planning, they found Clove alive, restrained, and facing an international warrant that would ensure he never walked free again. "You could have killed me," he said as they led him away, echoing his words from their previous encounter. "Again, you chose not to. Still that same weakness." Adela watched him go, the pain in her shoulder a dull throb, compared to the relief flooding through her. "It's not weakness to choose justice over vengeance," she said, more to herself than to him. "It's the hardest kind of strength." New beginnings 3 months later, as spring brought new growth to a world that had seemed locked in winter. Adela stood at the firing range of the Hawthorne Shooting Club. Now under new management and with a scholarship program for aspiring law enforcement officers from all backgrounds. As she demonstrated the woman who looked back at her was neither the elite military sniper of her past nor the invisible housekeeper of her intervening years. She was something new, a synthesis of all her experiences, strengths, and lessons learned through hardship and triumph. Across the range, Beckett watched with Bernice beside him, both of them smiling with a warmth that had been hard-won. Their relationship had been irrevocably altered by shared danger and survival, by the dismantling of artificial barriers between employer and employee, by the recognition of each other's full humanity. It wasn't a conventional family they had formed, but it was real and solid in ways that mattered more than convention. Later, as they shared dinner, at what had become their regular weekly gathering, Ethan raised his glass. To closing circles, he proposed, his weathered face creased in a smile. Bernice, solemn as only children can be in moments of importance, raised her glass of juice. To the best shooting teacher ever. Beckett's contribution was simpler but more profound. He didn't make a speech about what he had learned or how he had changed. Instead, he did something he would never have considered in his previous life. He got up without a word, went to the kitchen, and returned with refilled water glasses for everyone at the table. It was a small gesture, the kind of service he had always expected from others without thought. But in it was an acknowledgement more powerful than any words, that no person was above serving others. That dignity lay not in being waited upon, but in the mutual recognition of shared humanity. Adela watched him with a small smile, understanding the significance of the act. When it came her turn to toast, she kept it simple. "To seeing clearly," she said, raising her glass, "and to the courage to act on what we see." Have you ever looked past someone's job or social position to discover the extraordinary person beneath? Perhaps there's someone in your life right now, a service worker, a caregiver, a person whose daily contributions often go unnoticed, who possesses hidden talents and depth you've never taken the time to recognize. Remember that the most remarkable abilities and the most inspiring stories